Cheers, guys. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so Andy kind of gave a bit of my background. Was a professional rugby player. Actually, RJ signed my contract off for me at the Crusaders. So thanks, RJ. Just here to help and kind of help facilitate Mick's chat. So we've had conversations with Mick, and he's got a bit of a detailed plan around what we're looking at. So all we want to do is basically have some open-ended questions for Mick to kind of talk about his journey and where he's gone. And from there, you can either, when there's some pauses in the conversation, happy for you guys to go off mute and listen to ask Mick a question, or if there's something that comes up while he's talking, just use the chat function, chuck a question there, and then I can ask that question when we have a chance. So up to you either way. Like Andy said, the more interactive this is, the better for everyone, and hopefully we get some good info out of Mick. So further ado, on to you, Mick. So really probably the first question is just a bit of a summary of your journey and how you've got to where you are and what you've done in the past.
Yes, but the basketball coaching side of it, I've been doing it for about 20 years. I played, I realised pretty quickly that I wasn't going to have a career in it. So with some advice from some people and a realisation, I got into the coaching game sort of late teenage, early 20s. And by about early 20s, I'd been involved with clubs and schools and junior academies and state sort of performance programs, and had a bit of a light bulb moment maybe when I was around 22 or 23 that I might actually be able to do this thing. You know, it's not as cool as playing, but if I'm going to do it, I might as well have a crack. So I put a fair bit of energy into that, and I think it was a good thing to start off in sport at grassroots to get an understanding of grassroots funding and the challenges that local clubs have with surviving, and how they go about trying to increase their membership and service their members. And then the next 10 years was spent in the junior elite space, and that was great. That was working in state organisations and the national body and the National Institute and national junior teams, and so started to get a good understanding of the pointy end of the junior sport. And then the last 10 years has been more around the pro level, and the highlight for me obviously was going to the Olympics in Rio on a staff there with the national team. So I've enjoyed the journey, and I've always said to people that I never wanted to take it too seriously or take myself too seriously. I treat it as a roller coaster ride, and now's as accurate time as ever that the ride can get finished at any point. You know, you just never know. So you got to enjoy it while you're on it, the highs and the lows. And I realized that in my early 20s that if I just do it because I love the game of basketball and it's done so much for me that, and I don't take it too seriously, I got a chance of actually having a career in this and enjoying it. So that's the journey.
Talking about those things, does that kind of come under what your coaching philosophy is now? And has that changed over time? Because you've had quite a range of different areas of basketball. So has that philosophy changed, and is that what it is now?
I think my core values haven't changed. So I don't know if anyone's got. I'll try it. Maybe someone who's a bit more tech savvy than me when it comes to going through the PowerPoint on a shared screen on the second monitor. Does anyone know if you can do that?
Yep, that's right.
Oh, there we go. It is working. So yeah, hope to answer your question. Yeah, my philosophy, which I get to, I've got some information there around that, but I guess it's always based on who you are as a person, like your absolute, your bones, like your core values. And, I think those words that I've put on that slide, again, this was part of a job application for a professional club back in Australia, and like trying to sell myself to the board and management around this is the sort of person that you're going to get by work for you. But those values are based on, I guess, 360-degree feedback and different sort of, organisations that I've been involved in where you've had those sort of processes, peer feedback and that. So I put those in, and obviously put my wife and daughter at the heart of it. That they're the values that I try to live and revive. Thinking positively, even in these times, a challenge. But I'm definitely a glass half full guy. And we do have Pete, who's one of my assistant coaches. So if I'm full of it, he can jump in and correct me if I'm not being truthful. Growth mindset. I think it's commonly banded around phrase everywhere, but truly believe that, you know, I've always had an open approach to trying to get better. No one has all the answers. You know, we cut and steal and copy stuff from smarter people than ourselves, and try and find ways to integrate it into our systems or our programs. So there's some of the things. I'll skip through this slide because it was on the LinkedIn thing anyway.
Everybody on your feet, let's go! We got 3 minutes of this last one. Come on, Carlos, finish it. We got position over here. All on your feet, let's go! Get steady, on your feet, let's go!
I just love that video because there's so many images in there that resonate with what a coach is and the different elements of your environments. The players are heavily featured throughout that little 1 minute grab, and the fans is the other thing. And I think anyone that is involved in sport, whether it's, you know, with amateurs, amateur basketball or amateur sport, you know, it's your players, but your fans are your parents and your family and the people that are emotionally invested in the sport. And at a professional level, it's obviously a commercial thing. You need to stay alive, and to stay alive, you've got to have a following. And so if you go about your business the right way, you give your business the best chance to survive. And before I took the job here at the Rams, I guess talking to people that I was aware of in the New Zealand NBL and coaching friends and players that played here, that I guess the community in Canterbury and the parochialism and the long history. It was a club that hadn't won in recent times, but had a really great period of time there where they were quite successful. So it was a really exciting opportunity to come over here with our family and be a part of something special. So the philosophy stuff. I guess I get asked that a lot, and you know, you present to different groups of coaches and that. But I've got some notes there. But yeah, I guess to summarise it, I feel like, you know, our role as coaches and what I truly believe in is that we just want to create a positive environment for the people that we're involved with, where it's a learning environment, it's a challenge environment. So people that are part of it are invested in it because they feel that they can belong to it and they feel that they can grow on and off the court. So that may be a little bit cliche to some, but I truly believe in that if people enjoy what they do and they've got a passion for it, and there's a shared vision, you know, that's your best chance for people to really buy in and maximize their individual talents, but ultimately row the boat with you and work towards that goal. So happy to have a chat about any of those elements in there if anyone's got some questions or thoughts around that.
But the shared vision stuff, so I mean, the more years you're there, are you changing that vision every year, or are you keeping it the same and just adapting it? Because I've obviously, like reading up on you, you've gone across 5 or 6 different NBL sides, and then so you've done a mix of teams. Does that vision stay the same for each team, or again, have you adapted that over time?
So I think in the professional space, or obviously when you're representing your country, you know, it's podium finishes and it's winning. You know, that's how you. It's the ultimate prize is to win and be successful. But we know that the winning is the outcome. And I do have the iceberg image in here in one of these slides, but all that work that goes into the end result is you know, the end result's just a byproduct of if you've got the Monday to Friday sorted out, and you know, you can support the growth of athletes. Everyone, you know, staff have got autonomy to do their jobs, and people, you know, you've got talented people that are highly motivated that want to be part of something bigger than themselves. If you get to that space, then you give yourself the best chance of winning. So the vision for the professional game, I don't think's changed around winning championships. People know that if they're part of winning teams, then that's their best chance of, you know, continuing to be employed or increasing their capacity to earn money if they're, you know, if athletes have that small window. So, and then, you know, for Olympic sports and World Cups, like winning is such an important aspect. But it's the you know, that whole growth process orientated approach and really digging into what do we actually need to take care of now? What's important now? And I think that's the most important thing, is to live day by day and just stay focused on the process.
Just a question on what you've got there and how you arrived at that, because having worked with a lot of coaches, often they're passionate, they get involved because they love the sport they're involved in, and it's almost like they shoot first and aim later. So at what point did you sort of almost, and it's the question I sort of posed on the Facebook page, at what point did you go, there's a bit of stuff to this and I need to find out more about this and I need to develop a philosophy? Did that evolve over time, or was there a sort of an epiphany where you went, oh shit?
I've had and continue to have, and albeit like it's less frequent now, because I feel like, you know, when you're in the game for a long time and you're open-minded, you absolutely continue to learn. But it's that thing where for a young male in through my 20s and probably even going into my early 30s, there's those moments where you walk around with a lot of confidence and bravado and you think you know everything, and you get into a situation where you know, it may be like at a national camp or something, and maybe it's tactical stuff that's being discussed, and you know, in your own head you're like, shit, I'm out of my depth here, like what the hell are they talking about? You know, like I've had so many of those moments, and then you've either can bluff your way through it, or you can ask questions or go away and do some homework. So I think getting a bit of a smack in the face consistently through the period of time where I had, you know, this thirst and my knowledge was growing, I was learning all about these different tactical things. The management of a high performance environment, you know, you get put in situations where you think coaching is just, you know, coach your players and coaching the game, but then, you know, you've got to reporting to boards or reporting to owners and having relationships with, you know, key funders or key sponsors. Like that's a massive part of it. And what I have learned over time is, you know, the coaching part's the fun and the easier part. It's all the other stuff. And you have to be great at that other stuff and efficient at that other stuff to maximize the time you can actually spend with your players. And so those moments, I think maybe in my early 20s where, I don't know why, maybe it's the environment, you know, like because you show a bit of promise and you're passionate and you're putting your hand up for everything, that you start getting appointed for a lot of stuff and you have a bit of early success. So you know, I thought I had the Midas touch there for a few years, but the system rewarded that, you know, and so you continue to get appointed to things and you know, you win. And in reflection now, the way I coached, I was a raving lunatic in my early 20s, like just completely, and I know you settle over age, but yeah. So I think those moments being continually kicked up the arse were the best thing to happen. The best thing that ever happened to me was going to Perth, and I was 29 years old. I was always young. I got into coaching young. So the high performance role I had, I was 24, and I was the head coach of the Queensland Academy of Sport for basketball. I was the youngest guy by a mile. And so I kind of fought that a lot, but then at a point I kind of accepted it and said, hey, this is a good branding thing. Like I can promote myself as the youngest guy. I'll be the youngest coach to coach in the NBL. And I never played in it. I got close, but I never played in it. And so I went to Perth as the high performance manager as a 29-year-old and ran the state and all their programs and that. And then I got offered a job over a coffee to be an assistant coach with the Perth Wildcats as I was helping the head coach put his resume together. And it was like, this was too easy. For 10 years, I've tried to go the journey to become a professional coach. And now I just basically get handed this job. And so I walked out of there 10 foot high. And then when I got the contract and saw what the money was, I was like, there's no way I was going to do that. But that was like an absolute eye opener to go, people obviously believe, like this guy that I held in high regard said, no, I've seen you coach for the last year and run that program, like you can help us. And I had all these self-doubts and lack of confidence whether I actually would be good enough. And I think that was a big moment there to say, you know, I'm 29, I got into the NBL, and the best thing that happened was I had a great year, and we had an independent consultant review us and give us all of our ratings, and the CEO debriefed us, and they fired the head coach and I got fired. So it was the best thing to happen. It was horrible at the time, absolutely horrible at the time, and that to go through that. But it was over time understanding how stuff can just get taken away from you. You really do need to appreciate it. And I think learning that reminded me to just take things in its stride and take it as it comes and just enjoy it more, you know, because you get caught up in the rat race.
Mick, you talked a little bit, obviously, about your development as a coach, and then, you know, like early on, you were really thriving for kind of the thirst of knowledge, and, you know, it was early and you were going at it. So as time's gone on and you've got a little bit older, what have you done? Like, obviously, have you kept up that thirst for knowledge, or how have you kept developing as a coach as you've got older?
So I think, and we're on a conference call with Pat during the week around mentorship, and I think, you know, we're trying to do something in our sport around supporting a group of coaches in that space. And there's a couple of things in reflection. There's some experiences that I had as a coach that at the time, like I worked for quite a well-known coach in Australia that was like just neo-Nazi, black and white, do it this way or it's the highway, traditional sort of approach. And as the assistant coach, wedged between and a young coach too, it was a horrible season. Like it was, you know, you go from A to B and that's it. And it's like, well, hang on, what if the defense does this? And it's like, well, you just cut harder. You just go A to B. Like it was really, really black and white. And so at the time, I really didn't enjoy that. But, you know, a couple of years later, the light bulb comes on and I go, actually, that's really crystallized what I want to be like as a head coach. Because I know I don't want to coach that way. But what I do know is that he was really organized, meticulously planned. Every drill was done for a reason and a purpose. And even though the drills themselves or the approach and his monotone, and like it wasn't fun and exciting or engaging, but what I took away from that was the planning and the periodization and the processes that he had in place. But I didn't see that at the time. I just was like, God, this guy's a nightmare to deal with. So, you know, I got in front of myself. So learning from people that taking whatever you can out of a situation. So that's one thing. And then the other stuff, obviously, like there's people that have had a massive, like they've shown faith in my journey and are true mentors for me and will look me in the eye and tell me, hey, you know, you just need to be better in this area or you're doing well. And like Andre Lamanis, I'm not sure, he coached the New Zealand Breakers to 3 championships for people that know a bit about basketball and was the Australian national coach. You know, he's a guy that I've probably learned such an amazing amount for, and I probably copy and steal the most when it comes to how do you build relationships with players and manage complex high performance environments. So, you know, my wife's when we go, hey, do you want to talk basketball right now? She'll give me honest, brutal feedback. So that's what you want. So yeah, I think having continual people in your life that can tell you how it is. Yeah. Cut the bullshit, tell you how it is really important. And then there's the other bit around, I think now, like the coaches that I've got, that I work with, you know, we've got one guy that's quite a little bit younger, but he's in that space where he's extremely academic, really switched on, highly motivated, and just really clever. And so I think learning from the next generation of people has been really exciting as well. And so I think, you know, whether it's all, you know, people with more experience that can tell you and guide you through difficult times, or younger, or people that, you know, that are on the cusp of technology and can keep you in touch with the younger generation. I think having a balance is quite good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we always think about, like, for personally, I always think about people above me to get, or above me in terms of age and philosophy and experience to get information from or learnings. But it's cool that you're thinking of the people that not below you, but that are younger than you that are coming in too. think that's pretty awesome. That's pretty growth mindset, in my opinion. One of the questions here, which you kind of talked a little bit about, Andre Lemanis, around kind of the building relationships and connections with your players. So one of the questions here was, how do you build connections with players throughout the season, and how does that environment you create enhance this? So that was one of the questions, and you kind of, wondering if you could talk a little bit more around the player connection and positive environment stuff.
Let's all knock off the positive environment stuff first. I've just put the other bits of that slide. Does that come up? The accountabilities and actions.
Now you're still on the coaching philosophy and culture one at the moment.
Yeah, is there a few other graphics though that have come up?
Oh, yeah. It is down the side there. Yep.
Yeah. So I think like having a positive environment is best achieved if everyone's pretty crystal clear on what their roles are and what is acceptable and what's not. And so whether it's in your preseason having agreed standards or establishing what the line is, but I keep it pretty simple with our guys. If you don't say anything, you're agreeing. And I would hope that, we pitched 3 or 4 different leadership models to our group. I've got my own personal opinion on what I think the right way is with that. But, allowing, like we had players that have played in that pretty high level teams. And so we put together 3 different models, captain model, leadership group model, or everyone's a leader. And we said, here's some pros and cons as a summary. But for this group, what do you think is going to be the best model for us to be successful? And luckily, they chose the right answer.
I was going to say that. That's the right one. Yeah.
But it just came back to it doesn't matter who you are in the group. If you're an 18-year-old kid and you see our import, not doing what we said we were going to do, he should feel like it's safe enough to go, hey mate, you need to run that lane harder. Well, your job's to go get that rebound. Can you rebound more for us? And vice versa. It's not always this senior and rookie thing. Like I'm not a big, I respect people that have clocked the miles and have achieved what they've achieved. What they've done in their career is, is proof in the pudding. But like, what are we doing today? And I think to be positive, if people know what the boundaries are and you continue to reward. So the thing around the red flags and reward, we'd have a little health check after each game. Yeah. And as a staff, we'd meet first, and then and the playing group would come in, and it would be, all right, so do we have any red flags we need to deal with that hadn't been dealt with as they occurred during the week? If there were, we dealt with them, and if there wasn't, so what are the rewards, And so we'd always, every week, we'd have a community award for a guy that went above and beyond, or it could have been something simple, like putting your body on the line or what have you. But I think having a positive environment is easier to achieve if everyone knows the parameters and they know, and you continue to reward. And I'll talk everyone's ear off, but a really quick analogy. I work for one coach that would take the approach of, we'd get to a game, win or lose, if there's an area of the game that was poor. So in basketball, say my containment defense was poor. When I closed out or when I got closer to the player I was guarding, they drove past me. His approach would be, I want every single breakdown in the game, and we're going to get these guys to sit down and they're going to watch it. And he's a brilliant coach in some ways, but that was his approach, and those video sessions were painful. When I worked with Andre Lemanis, he just said, yeah, I know it was, these are the 3 areas of the game that we were really poor, like smart enough to know when we saw the game. Go get me in this one area, go get me 5 edits. Let's get 2 examples of poor, but let's get 3 examples of the guys doing it right. And let's continue to show them the way we want it done. And so I found that that was another light bulb moment. The type of coach I wanted to be, the environment I wanted to lead, and the approach with building relationships with players, because no human being likes being told that they're not good. They're poor. They keep making mistakes. They're not talented enough. They're not committed enough. So the reward system and just making a big deal about the little things, I think, is a long way to go to gaining players' trust. If they know that you genuinely care about them and you care about the little things, and you make a big deal about, it could be a guy improving his shot. So that's a big part. I'll take a breath. I think the other thing too is dealing with people for or working with people because they are people, and they may be professional athletes, or they could be kids that you're coaching in a junior space, but treating every situation, dealing with a person as opposed to dealing with the product or dealing with the athlete. And so I try to develop strong relationships with players, at a personal level, just to understand, what their intrinsic motivations are and what the situations they have in their lives. Like, for those that watch the news tonight, we've had some pretty bad news around our sport of basketball tonight. But in anticipation of that, I rang every single player on our team today just to see how they're coping with stuff. Some guys are all good and all cool, and other guys have got some pretty legitimate things going on in their lives. So I think, relationships can't be faked. You try to fast track them, but generally you just got to invest the time, because the other stuff will take care of itself if someone's bought in. And then the last part is like we've got smaller groups. We maximize all of our support staff. So Pete and our 2 other assistants, they've got a little group of guys, like a cohort of guys that they kind of manage and lead. So it's not done positionally. There's a broad cross section, and that allows more leadership by our staff, and just it makes more sense. It's more efficient, so I can kind of check in with the smaller groups more regularly. So there's some of the strategies that I probably move on, but yeah, I can go on and on about the different stuff that we try and do.
It's really cool. Have you found, obviously working across Australia and New Zealand now, and you probably get asked this question quite a lot, any key differences that you see, strengths and weaknesses either way, that you can see from the Australian side to the New Zealand side? So,
and these are all broad generalizations, they're not specific, but from what I'm learning more and more about the cultural approach to sport in New Zealand, and it's not everyone, but generally it seems to be, having some confrontational, difficult discussions can be quite challenging for some of the local players that we have here. So maybe the approach is a little bit more subtle, but then along with that is also trying to encourage those guys to be able to give and receive, firm and honest feedback. I feel perhaps with Australian, and again, a generalization, because every individual person is different, but you can have a bit more of a direct conversation and not hurt people's feelings as much. I find that though the players that have been in the US college system and been a part of that society and that kind of US culture, they're probably adapted and taken a lot out of that. So they've come back and they're a little bit more sort of extroverted and outgoing, and kind of handle. Basically, after having a US college coach scream and yell at them and mofo them for 4 years, they can come back and they can handle a little bit more direct feedback. So that's one thing, I guess, maybe from a coaching point of view, is that there's obviously the cultural side of things in regards to the multi-culture and Pacifica culture, and it's, every culture is unique, but I mean the Indigenous culture in Australia, like I spent 10 years in North Queensland, and so Cairns is a real hub for the Indigenous communities and the Torres Strait Island communities. So there's definitely parallels, or the processes around how do you connect with people with quite diverse backgrounds, and just things that are just different in family structures and society, and what they value, and what some of the things around eye contact and respect with leaders and elderly people and that. So I think there's obviously real cultural issues and sensitivities that you've got to be aware of as a coach, and so that's been a learning thing for me. From a playing point of view, I really don't see much difference at all. Like New Zealand, for 5 million people, New Zealand punches way above its weight in the men's side of the game. The Tall Blacks and the Boomers have had some great clashes. We've just got more numbers, but I don't see I think you take New Zealand with their world ranking and what they're able to achieve against other small countries around the world. I think the men's game does very well. I think the women's game is different because of netball and a few other things. The women's basketball in Australia, there's quite a gap, but it's the basketball side of it's very similar. The last part on that is the coaching space. Again, small sample size in Canterbury and the South Island, but the capacity and the willingness to want to share and like just like here's my playbook, here's all my information, go ahead and read it and challenge and be competitive. I think that's a bit more open-minded in Australia in my experiences, and things like this are unreal, and we definitely have taken that approach with some of the programs that we're doing about just sharing. We're all part of the same thing. We want the same thing, and we may coach against each other and compete hard week to week, but let's catch up after that and have a chat. And if you become better, you can make me better. You make me think harder and work harder. So, but ultimately, we're actually all part of the same thing. So, that's probably an area I think that needs a bit of growth from what I hear from the stalwarts of the sports here and from my observations as well.
Yeah, so I suppose, and then moving on from that, obviously from seeing so many different players, like the talent word's obviously bandied around lots, but is there key things that you look for in an individual or a player? Like, has that changed, or by seeing so many, is there like kind of for you, is it like, well, that guy's going to be good? And is there key things that you can kind of share about what you see with players and what makes them good and what makes them talented, I suppose?
I'm really keen to, and again, if this wants to be opened up a little bit, happy to hear people's thoughts. I guess that close to a decade I spent as in my earlier part of my coaching journey was a lot of Institute of Sport and talent search programs, and there was this massive premium on like bringing people in, measuring arm spans and heights, and how fast they can run and how long their limbs are. And all right, well, rowing, basketball, there you go. That's what you can do. So I was definitely biased around the athletic, I guess, needs to be able to perform sport at an elite level. And there is plenty of cases of, like in basketball generally is a tall sport, but there are heaps of cases of, people that are average height or short, and they can excel in the sport. So what I have realized over time is you need to have some competencies athletically. If you're short, you need to be quick, or you need to be strong, or you need to have great reaction times, which often can go hand in hand. Just being tall doesn't equate to becoming a basketball player. We do understand that it takes a longer time often for longer limbed athletes to develop the skills and to really reach their full potential. So you'll see a lot of taller athletes involved in and no doubt I imagine volleyball is the same and some other sports. So there's still taller athletes that do get picked in different programs for that reason, potentially ahead. But I think the physiological side of it is important, but doesn't hold the same weight of importance perhaps as what it had previously. What I personally look at is when I watch kids play games and I've got my talent ID hat on, or I'm out there trying to work out, what kids are we going to pick for Mainland Eagles, or giving some feedback, is decision making. And a lot of that's obviously subjective. Body language, how are they when they're up 20, down 20? What are they like at the end of the game if it's a blowout or if it's an absolute cracker? Who rises to the occasion, who shies away from it. So mistake response is a big one. What kids can turn the page quickly, and what ones, beat themselves up and get in front of themselves. So, but I do understand that you will never get a complete package when you're dealing with, 12, 13, 14, 18, 19-year-old people in their early 20s. So whatever selection criteria that you put in place when it comes to your talent ID or recruitment, I think it needs to be diverse, and it needs to I guess, allow your assessors to be able to look into, all of those aspects that make up, athletic performance. But I would have way more of a bias now on how people, how coachable are they in regards to their learning capacity. So, they may be great athletes and all that stuff, but, if you spend 3 years and tens of thousands of reps trying to refine something, but they just don't have that capacity to apply that athleticism in games, or they can't, make the right decisions frequently enough to be an impactful player, then, they're probably not going to be the sort of player that fulfills, meets their ceiling.
Yeah, brilliant. Because one of the questions that just came through was actually, what techniques do you use to develop decision making?
Yeah, so we try and give context to every drill that we do. So there's a simple thing we have around our curriculum is that there's the skill first and foremost, like you continually to try and develop your skill, but the skill needs context. And so there's obviously some work around some closed skill development and form shooting in basketball or stuff that can be done individually. But, you know, it's such a big thing around in our sport, and I'm pretty sure it would be around the world across all sports, is how can you, you know, manipulate, whether it's constraints, coaching approach, or adding in manipulations in drills or noise or simulate game situations where the skills that you're focusing on are ultimately tested in high reps. The old first thing, like I spent 10 years going through all the level 1s, level 2 coaching stuff and redoing that. And that was all that traditional coaching. Can you teach the 7 key teaching points of a jump stop, you know, as opposed to now where it's like get kids to go out and play and run and jump and you know, don't assume they don't know, let them play and then correct on the fly. So we do a lot of drills, even at the Rams or our academy kids, that are constraints based, you know, manipulate the score, manipulate the space. I think there's a good thing around change it. Has anyone heard of the change it model or the theory of, if you Google that, it's a strategies around when you've got a training session, there's all, it's an acronym, so you can change your trainings or your drill in a whole bunch of different ways. So change it's a pretty good strategy to use. So yeah, we try and do that all the time to make it fun, to change it up. We may still be working on a closeout or a simple rotation, but you know, we'll change the start of it to become unpredictable, or you know, limit the number of passes or dribbles, or incentivize the scoring, or whatever it is to try and make sure that that skill it is actually what we're working on, and the communication that sits in behind it. So yeah, that's a fun part of planning practices.
And just one of the things that you got on here about making everybody connected, I just think that that's really good. You do a really good job with that compared to other coaches I've seen. Make everybody important. So how do you, you know, like making the last player on the team feel as important as the best player on the team, and everyone's improving. I think that's a really important aspect. Like the players know the reason why we're doing the drill as well. I think that's often overlooked. Often you jump into a training session and you're told to do this and this and this, but if you're told why very quickly, then they will focus and give full energy.
Player feedback, and obviously your performance staff. Like we have a performance staff meeting every week, which is hard because not everyone's full time with us. They run their own clinics and that. So we map out our loads and we have our plan well in advance, and we revisit it. But you know, I do continually ask the players, and it's not always the veterans. Like you might ask a young guy, like, you know, how are you coping with it? Is this easy for you, or is it getting a bit tough? Like they put their RPE scores in, but I think it's just as insightful to ask an 18-year-old guy that really doesn't know any better to a 30-year-old guy that's probably been in a whole bunch of professional teams across the world that really understands it and is happy to give feedback. So I think, you know, continually seeking a bit of feedback on how practice is being shaped. Should we scrimmage a bit more? Should we drill a little bit more? Is there a particular part of the game, you know, like trying to change up that monotony in training, like all those sorts of things I think are important. And the players, like anything, they feel like they got ownership over it if they've had some influence on it. Because at the end of the day, as a coach, you've always got the right to go, stiff shit, we're doing it this way. You know, like you can always dig your heels, and if you feel like that's needed, and from time to time it is. But yeah, that's definitely one of the approaches that we use.
You talked a little bit about RPE scale and that. So where does your kind of like, where's the sports science role? Do you have much things around what works with in terms of sports science and physical testing and the use of RPEs and wellness scales and all that type of thing?
The being around the Australian Olympic team was a good one because they have fusion sport. I think it's was it athlete management system. So that was my sort of first real, you know, like get thrown in the deep end and really have a look at that and understand that. And so what we've done here in Canterbury is there's quite a cheap app that there's a gentleman by the name of Leonard King, who's our high performance manager in New Zealand. He American guy that played for years and years in New Zealand, and I used to work for him at Basketball Queensland, and we actually developed the concept of the app, and then afterwards started to build the app with the basketball coach that was a software developer. And essentially it was just a cheap app. And I'm not trying to sell the app here, but I guess the story of it is it was built by basketball people targeted from pro down to community sport. And so it ended up becoming an organizational platform with your calendars and all your community stuff and chat features and that. But the heart of it was actually the RPE. Like, we were having all these issues with our best high school kids, you know, doing 7 trainings at high school, going to their junior academy, playing for the senior team on the weekend, getting lower back stress fractures and shin splints. And we hadn't, and we still haven't, but hadn't solved the problem, you know, like on scholarship at private schools and having a demand to do things. So that was the approach, was the state organisations. How can we do this? Well, we needed to build an education tool and a mechanism to have athletes take a bit of ownership over the data and educate them around it and their parents. So then we can actually start educating our coaches better and work with stakeholders. We used a second division team that I coached over there, like a state league team, as the test dummies. And then we actually used the Brisbane Bullets. And so now a couple of the NBL teams and WNBL teams, and we use it at the Rams and Basketball New Zealand use it. But educating the players on, it's important that they do give honest feedback around how sessions are. And I think compliance is always a big challenge with athletes. I'm sure people have found that. But I think what helps with the compliance is if you are giving consistent feedback to the players, so they actually feel like when they flag an injury or they flag that they're a little bit more stressed or they're lacking motivation, that one of the coaches, and that's why we have the group system, to be able to, hey, you know, I've seen that you've been a little bit flat the last couple of days. Are you all right? You know, is everything going on? So it's a safe way for players to communicate what's going on in their lives. And then obviously the same thing with the load management. You know, our performance coach can set the team load. I'm a simple guy. All I need to know is how long can we go for and how hard. So every training session it's 80 minutes and we're going to go 7 out of 10. Yeah. And then I've got a drills database based on, you know, the technical and tactical stuff we wanted to work on, that will put the training plan together. But if the strength coach goes, hey, go a bit harder on Monday, we're good. No worries, we'll go a bit harder. So that's the kind of the way I operate. But then we work through every individual player and go, he's actually going to get, his will be shortened by 20. This one's a non-contact. This one needs to do a bit more, and so on and so forth. So I think you've still got your team framework, but you need to find efficient ways to then cater it to individuals. And when the individuals see that you genuinely care about what they're doing, they will give more, and they'll at least be a lot more honest when it comes to giving feedback about their health and that sort of stuff.
One of the questions here was, how do you see regional sport in Canterbury emerging after the coronavirus, and how do we kind of move out of this, and how are we going to see some opportunities to grow out of this?
We don't have the answers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think collaboration's a really important thing. There's a lot of information out there. Obviously, we have the Ministry of Health and the federal governments and high performance sport and Sport Canterbury. So we've got some good organisations around some guidance. But when it comes to an actual sports themselves, I think having some focus groups that get together that have the right sort of expertise on those groups to say, hey, like, you know, we just had a teleconference before this around the kids are back at school now. Not all of them, but we've got a group of athletes now. And so some of the feedback is around, like, by habit, we've got into the routine on our Zoom calls to go, you know, how are you feeling and you okay? And that, well, the kids are getting asked that 12 times a day now, you know, so our intentions are good, but we're probably actually part of the problem, you know? So I think having a bit more of a broader understanding around the community sport level, that instead of being in silos, if we can find a way or a mechanism to collaborate and to go, you know, each individual sport, you know, commercially and you know, like some have gone under and some are really, you know, hanging in there. So that you know, maybe we can help each other too around, you know, the best way to get back on your feet or creative ways. But as sports deal with how they'll run their own sport, I think looking after young people from a more you know, just a wellness and welfare point of view is important. But it's got to have the approach has got to be without actually adding fuel to the fire. So, you know, who has what role in regards to how you support, you know, domestic competition and local sport. And, you know, I think then that will kind of drive from the ground up into your academies and regional things. So sharing information is a good thing, but I think it's got to be the right people on the call and people that are in a position to actually have make some informed decisions. And so then you're educated around how you roll it out with your sport.
Mick, probably from my point of view, awesome listening to you. I've taken some, I've written about 3 pages, mate, with you just talking about some of the stuff, and really liked kind of philosophy around, obviously you've got a group to worry about, so you've got to think about the whole group, but then you've got to think about the individual within that as well. So you're kind of managing both at the same time. And just, yeah, your willingness to grow and take feedback across the whole group of people, and where you've been, it's impressive to listen to, mate, and I would be cool to be part of your environment, I reckon. Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
from my point of view, thank you for kind of sharing your knowledge as you talked about, and letting all of us hear kind of your IP and where you're coming from. Yeah, sorry, there's one question that's come through here. Mick touched on creating an environment where the youngest player can call out a poor performing player at training. Can you share how you encourage that to happen?
So I think that comes right at the start of the year, when you need some time. Like, you need to be in the bowl together to kind of merge and kind of work out some personalities and that. So it can't be right from day one. There's certain day one things that you do, but after the group's been together for a short period of time, and ours is quite accelerated in our league, because, you know, we only have a 4-week preseason and then away you go. So a few weeks into it, when we have our team preseason camp, that's kind of the stuff that we would really focus on, is around like the leadership model. What is leadership? What's the model that's going to work for us? But what does it actually look like? And so we would do some not case studies, what you're saying, some simulations around that. So when, you know, and I would do things like talking to, like, you're in a good place when your best, most talented players want to get coached. And so that's one thing I've learned from, that's a commonality amongst several really, you know, coaches that I feel are really good coaches, is that you coach everyone equitably. You know, how you communicate is obviously different with communication styles or the situation, but you know, going to a veteran and going, hey, you know, you're a key player in our club. You know that. How can you help this group get to where it needs to get to? And they'll have their opinions. And it's like, well, that's great. So you're saying we need to be able to do this. Well, you need to be comfortable with an assistant coach, myself, or a young guy holding you to that standard. And I always, you know, you get it. Guys get into each other at training. Sometimes you got to pull them apart and all that sort of stuff. But it's around performance outcomes. You know, whenever it gets personal and guys, you know, get carried away and ego, you know, testosterone goes over the top, it's like, hey, is that helping us? I think you need to have those circling back points. So when you establish some stuff early in the preseason around the identity of the team and what you want to be valued for, that's the role that I see as a manager, and coaching as part of that is, hey, we said we were going to do this. Is that helping us right now? And I guess that hopefully empowers, and I would, you know, say to guys like, you know, maybe there's something a bit sensitive in a meeting that I might bring a guy aside and say, look, you know, video today, you're going to feature in a couple of clips. So, you know, I hope you're ready to man up, because, you know, I'm not going to attack you personally. It's about us getting better. So you're happy to wear that on the chin. So maybe you prime a guy to soften the blow. You know, you can be manipulative around different things to obviously achieve the outcome for the group. And so that's where the young guys can play a role. Like, you see their body language and it's like, hey, what do you think about that? You know, if they're drifting, you know, what's your opinion? You happy with that? You know, and just kind of, sometimes you give them a little shove in the back so they jump in the deep end, and other times they'll do it themselves. But, you know, that's kind of the art of it. You know, we don't all have the answers, but, you know, it's the fun part of it. Is trying to find ways to facilitate those things. Because if it's led by the players, then it's great.
You're good, mate.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Mick. Yeah, reiterating Jed's message, that was fantastic, mate. I, you know, took a lot out of that. There was a lot of fantastic stuff, and the balance between group and individual, you know, in a team sport is is such a challenge, and I hope for those that coach individual sports too, there was a lot of that personal connection and man management stuff that was really good. I'd like to see if I could find a link to that Change It model somewhere and maybe get that posted onto the Facebook page. I think that constraints-based coaching is, personally, that's something that I've really experienced the good sides of, and I think it's the real future of coaching and stimulating those creative, innovative brains. That's how you really keep an athlete engaged, particularly as they move on through their career. So I'm really interested to find out more about that. But thank you so much, Mick, for your time. It was awesome, mate. So much appreciated.